Let me try that again. It's Quarantine in Stations, March 17th, 2020. I'm Matterall. We are in a interesting position here for the next weeks or months in that we will probably be sheltering at home. That's my household. And I imagine the rest of California and the United States will catch up to what Europe is doing in order to resist this virus that leads to a disease called COVID-19. So we are going to be quarantined in stations for many, many episodes. And we'll sit here and talk about EVE Online, but we'll also talk about real life. And there we are. So Arya's here and Caleb's here. How are you guys?
Hi, guys.
Hello.
And we invite you to come into Public Voice 2 on TIS Discord, and you can hang out with us as we talk about stuff. And I guess later in this episode, we'll talk about Loyalty to Lowsec, which is coming March 24th. That's in 7 days. And it's a faction war frigate escape, unlimited time events. Interesting, they picked faction war. So we'll read that a bit later. But how are you guys holding up?
It's serious business now. They're rolling out the Queen here.
They're rolling out the what?
The Queen. We are getting a speech from the Queen at our 8 o'clock. So the big guns are out now.
Oh, I see.
Not the UK Queen, the Danish Queen. So same family, different country.
Same family. Well, our closest thing to that is Arnold Schwarzenegger and his two ponies.
Which is an amazing video, and that dude is just so cool. He should be emergency president.
See if I can find him.
And if Donald Trump's current rope line roulette leads to him not being able to be president, I think you should really follow my advice and put Schwarzenegger in there.
Let's see if we could do this. There he is. I never was a big fan of Schwarzenegger politically until now. Actually, he was good on the environment for a Republican.
Come on. See, the important thing is that you stay at home because there's a curfew now. Okay, no one is allowed out, especially someone that is like 72 years old. After you're 65, you're not allowed at the house anymore in California. So we stay home and we eat here, right? Oh yes, that's yummy. I ate with the whiskey, and there's Lulu. Lulu loves carrots. Whiskey loves carrots. I just had my little bit of vegan food. Oh, that was yummy, huh? Oh, see, that's what we do. We don't go out, we don't go to restaurants, we don't do anything like that anymore here. We just eat with whiskey and with Lulu. We have a good time. We get entertained. Look at that beautiful smile she has, huh? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, they're yummies, huh? And we have a good time eating here together. So much more fun than going outside. No more restaurants, okay? No more restaurants, forget all that. Public gatherings, restaurants, and all those gymnasiums out the window. We stay home. Okay, whiskey, huh? You, and I have you in my neck. Mwah. Yeah, whiskey. And you, I have you too. Now I have both of you. Look at this picture here. Yeah. No biting. Okay, you got to get along. Because we're in very small quarters. We have a very small house here. Yeah. Good girls. I love it. Good girls.
Yeah, it's awesome.
He's just, I don't necessarily agree with him politically. sane, right? I think I feel the same about Arnold as I do about actual Dirk McGurk, with, of course, the added more real friendship and contact. We might not agree on anything, but the sanity level is just to the max. Of course, I'm pretty sure Dirk is a bit smarter than Arnold Schwarzenegger, but that's a different story.
Yeah, same.
Of course, Dirk McGurk does not have donkeys, so he loses out on that.
I think he's big on the environment either. Schwarzenegger is big on the environment. Yeah. Dirk's not.
So he said something interesting. He said that there's a curfew in California for those that are 65 or older. Yeah. Is that true?
I think that's true. If you're 65 and older, you got to shelter in place. But I thought that was true nationwide. Or is it still a recommendation?
From everything I've watched, I think the federal government in the U.S. is sending out recommendations. They're not mandating or forcing states to follow their recommendations. They're leaving up to the governors of each state the legislature of each state to make those decisions.
Well, it's just weird because the mayors are making one level of decisions, governors making another, and then the federal government making a third. So it's hard to know what's what right now. But I know that we're just following the lead of, I'm just doing what Korea or China is doing and sheltering in place with everybody. The family is not really going out.
And I'd just like to point out, because Aria said earlier that he was ahead of the curve and following all this news stuff. I think I feel like I'm one of the most informed people in the country about what's actually going on with this whole COVID thing, because of Talking in Station's politics channel, because you're just getting live feed and discussions and details from everywhere on the minute. It rolls in almost like the second after it's been on a website.
Yeah, it's because we have such smart people like probing news sources from all over the world. That channel gets current events quicker than any news channel. So it's like our own private Twitter feed with more than just Twitter. It's articles and everything else. What?
Yeah, and comments and analysis. Yeah. And then, of course, a lot of smack talk fun, which is also like half of the entertainment in there.
Right. So we're trying to move a lot of that into a new channel at TIS called Quarantine in Stations. You'll see it. It's brand new. That's where all the information for the real life quarantines are happening. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. You should be quarantining. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I just tried to jump in there and say hello.
Is that an autistic post?
And say what?
I'd say hello. Sorry, Kyle. I wanted to say hello before I started chiming in. That's
yeah. The politics station has been interesting with it's not just social media and news about the virus. There's a lot of medical and scientific links being posted, and I felt that I think I learned more about what was going on in other countries and how this was spreading faster than what the news was reporting. I would see things on the news in the past week. I've seen that channel weeks before.
So New York has instituted some protective measures as of yesterday. All movie theaters and gyms are closed. All restaurants and bars are restricted to no dine-in, delivery and pickup. Crowds are limited to size of 50 or smaller. All public schools are closed for over a month, and all eviction proceedings and notices are suspended until indefinitely.
Yeah, pretty much everyone is catching up. I linked one of the sites that do the data collecting, and one of the things I really liked about it is that you can see the side-by-side graphs, so you don't have to like remember them when you're individually looking at the things like wiki entries or stuff like that. You can actually see them, so you can see how different countries are faring, and you can almost like now start predicting when they're going to put in what measures, because they all seem to be trying to pick up from some of the success stories, and then implement these policies at certain points. It's just that some are getting there very late, in my opinion.
There have been some technology and content distribution developments because of this. There are several networks and countries that have had connectivity issues due to increased internet usage. Services have, so Discord, for instance, increased the limit on the Discord streaming from 10 viewers to 50. Discord had issues because of that yesterday.
Basically, they put the go live limit to
Yes.
from 10 to 50, which is actually really useful, because if you need to do things like streaming education stuff or meetings and things like that, Discord is now a real alternative because it's available for the free user. I think what's even more fun is that you pretty much saw people start adopting, I think, yesterday, because it had a huge fallout where I think they did some sort of emergency patch and put the limiters up, because it was out for almost an hour or two.
So a lot of
Yeah.
these internet issues, and one of the most interesting developments that I've seen come out of this is that there's a number of movie production houses that are putting out new films on the internet, and you will pay theater prices, and you'll get it for, I think, 24 or 48 hours. And these are brand new releases that are being released simultaneously in theaters and streaming.
Yeah, the good thing about all this is it really becomes like a little bit of a catalyst for all of the developments on how to actually utilize the internet for useful things instead of only monetization.
Sure.
It's almost, I could jokingly call it the normies are coming, because they're figuring out that they shouldn't just be a product when they are using the internet. This whole Facebook thing where you are the actual monetization is just bad, because we should have gotten real utility on here long ago. And of course, my personal favorite is how this finally forces the education system to actually wake up and use these tools.
Sure.
And it's going to be a huge effect on the other side, I'm sure. I'm seeing people that would not like to adapt to this type of platform being forced into it, and they actually like it. So I just think this is an amazing positive effect from all this.
Sure. And we all
Move it.
know that necessity is the mother of invention, or in a slightly more cynical phrasing, nothing ever changes until things are bad.
Yeah, so interesting on some of the state level changes. I heard of Pennsylvania today, they will enact liquor store closings.
But how am I going to get all my alcohol for sterilization?
Yeah, my state is just closing restaurants and bars effective this evening, but restaurants can still do takeout or drive-through. No in restaurant seating, and of course bars being closed for my state this afternoon. But liquor stores concerns me. I didn't stock up on liquor. I stocked up on toilet paper, food, dog food, but I didn't actually stock up on liquor. And now I'm wondering, should I have done that?
I'm looking forward to one of the other things on the other side of all of this. It's going to be what it would be considered the post-mortem analysis, where you can go in and look at all this data, because the data sharing in this current phase is just amazing. We're getting so much data from everywhere all the time, right? And there's so much to crunch from an analysis point of view on the other side. One of my personal interest is this whole thing of what is it with fear and the whole hoarding, and when does calm hit? Because it looks as if it's like a psychological bump where it's the brain that's panicking because it doesn't know what to do with all this information and all this new adaptation stuff, and then it figures, okay, I can do one thing. I can go and buy toilet paper, or I can buy some more guns and ammo, or I can buy some yeast, and all this dumb stuff. It's just because the brain is still not evolved for our society, so it needs something to focus on that it can actually handle. And each country seems to have different phases of time period length when it comes to how long it takes for people to cool down.
The knee-jerk panic reaction is something that the human race has yet to manage.
Well, you can't. It's simply because we need something to feel that we have agency, especially in a stress period. It's basically a macro version of OCD, right? You need something to do when you're trying to handle stress or anxiety.
Sure, and the more, I guess, stable or emotionally balanced individuals will make wiser decisions, and the less so, which is the majority of the population, will react out of FUD.
Yeah, and it's just how can we get to a point where we then start channeling and focusing all that stress and anxiety into something more constructive and positive. And this is where I'm kind of excited that at least here locally, they're starting to get a hold of some of the elderly people to tell stories about how actual life was during things like World War II shutdown when they had the blackouts, and how people behaved and socially figured out how to manage this whole horrible situation.
Yeah, I gotta say, my dogs are not helping with my prep. And for those in chat, no, I did not hoard toilet paper. We usually just only have a day or two left of toilet paper, so we decided to be a little more proactive than that. But I bought a whole bunch of keto snacks, because I'm on a keto diet, and I was worried about fresh food being kind of wiped out from my local grocery store, and their little chocolate snacks. Well, the dog got into that last night, so
someone
we went
in my
through our paper towels after inducing vomiting and having the dogs vomit all night.
Oh Lord!
They've now gone through several rolls of paper towels cleaning all that up.
Someone in my corp was talking about going grocery shopping to stock up, and how the produce section was stripped completely bare, like not a shred of anything left. And he walked one aisle over to the organic produce, and that was untouched. Because I'm willing to buy the regular groceries for panic, but I'm not going to pay the extra $1 for my panic.
Well, I think the interesting phenomenon is that there seems to be a correlation between a nation's trust in their own government and the level of panic and hoarding. And the really weird thing is that even though the actual business owners came out and says the supply chain is not broken, there's still stuff coming in. It's going to be coming in potentially with the same speed as normal. There is no glut. There's no scarcity. Calm down. This is not EVE Online. There is no scarcity here. Just calm down. But they're not doing that, and that means that at least in the UK, I think they've just reached a point where actually even storage facilities are now out of quite a lot of product because people have been hoarding like crazy.
Yeah, and Shooter, like you said in chat, chocolate is real bad for dogs, definitely. And I have 4, and I didn't know which dog had the chocolate, so all 4 had to be induced for vomiting. So it was fun.
I'm just going to channel Arnold Schwarzenegger for a second. Please, people, with your animals, feed them what it says in the Wikipedia entry. Stop this thing with getting carnivores to eat chocolate and carrots. That's really not their food. Feed animals according to their actual diet.
I had one bad dog that was bad and got in the chocolate, and the other 3 were instantly put through vomit.
Yeah.
Tiberius jumped in the channel. Welcome, Tiberius.
Hey, Tiberius. How are you feeling?
Hello. I'm doing okay. My son is doing worse than I am. I told Matt earlier today, he sent me a message, I think yesterday. I did test positive for the virus, but I'm pretty asymptomatic. I have a mild cough, for lack of a better description. It's like a lingering, almost like like the beginnings of strep throat. That little prickly feeling that you feel in the back of your throat right before you get strep throat. That's kind of like the way that the best way I could describe it. My son, however, is down for the count. He's got when I checked on him this morning, he had a just over 101 degree fever. his cheeks are red. He's got a bad cough, and he's coughing up green crap.
I think that's one of the frustrating part about all this is the fact that this is a flu, right? So it's flu symptoms, which are so generic. It's like so annoying that there's like this whole list, and they're all stuff that is, you can have so much false diagnosis and panicking yourself, right? At least with other diseases, you kind of have these distinct symptoms that stand out, and you say, okay, it's that. So yeah, I'm not going to channel House MD, but it is really frustrating because I think it adds to the fear that people can sit there and think they have it and then actually have nothing but something completely different.
Yeah.
How old is your son?
He's 21. And I am 39. And yes, that does mean I had a child at 17.
Wow.
So this thing is, I hear a lot of people comparing it to the flu, you know, and that it affects lungs.
I would say,
is it closer to a SARS type of illness as opposed to a flu?
I've never had any clinical experience with SARS. I've only read a little bit about SARS. Now, technically, COVID-19 is a SARS virus. I believe it falls under SARS-12, for lack of a better word, but it's classified as a COVID virus, COVID-19, and then the colloquial term is coronavirus. So, yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen he looks like a flu patient. Like he's got flushed cheeks, flushed forehead, runny nose, just in general. But I would definitely say it looks and probably feels a lot closer to the flu.
Yeah, I was doing some research, and I saw that the designation has the word SARS in it. So I started looking up, well, what's a SARS virus? Is that like the flu? And I saw a couple of videos that disturbed me in terms of, you know, if you have SARS, it's not just whether you live or die. It's the stuff in between, the damage it can cause. So that I think has heightened my concern over this whole thing, because in the news it's very much portrayed as, oh, it's the flu. Either will die or you won't die, and you'll be fine.
I think another side effect from all of this, and I could be completely exaggerating it, but I was watching that pandemic documentary on Netflix, and comparing that to all the stuff and data that's happening right now. Of course, maybe some of it is a little bit hype, but it feels like we are realizing that there's a massive unused and untapped capacity for science on a global level, something that I haven't seen it before in modern history. The closest thing would be the response to the Y2K bug, where the actual businesses just got down to business and did what they had to do, right? And this is just similar. It's just everyone is collaborating. Everything is like moving at lightning speed compared to normal.
So there's also opportunities for misinformation. I don't know if Matterall touched on this at all. Did he talk about the French health minister's tweet?
No, I don't think we talked about it.
Yeah. So in contrast, I think there's definitely room for misinformation to also be spread.
Yeah, but if you might have noticed that at least now the sane people seem to be hitting on it really fast to get rid of that kind of nonsense, false information and fake news, right? Even Twitter closing accounts like in a fucking second when stuff is there that should not be there. The fact that even Fox News administration shut down Trish Reagan because she started doing the whole almost weaponized propaganda shit. We do not have the same normal that we had before where everything is just allowed.
Yeah, I want to say that pandemic, I can't watch that in my house. My wife is sufficiently freaked out that I can't really put any of that on. We put on stuff on the television that gets her mind off of it. She does healthcare. So right now, actually, she's seeing patients right now. So she's actually out there with a much chance of getting exposed than I do.
I just really liked it. And controlled my stress and anxiety levels for watching it, because the quality of information, then seeing these real life examples of what's actually being done in epidemiology, it was a fascinating insight. And I think it's almost a prophetic thing, because everything they said in this show, and I think it got released 6 months ago or something like that, and everything that's being commented on about budgeting and capacity and future research and cures and multispectral vaccines and all that stuff is just so relevant right now. It's like, oh, holy shit.
So Look Back War says one good thing, maybe the world will learn that we are all one race, the human race. And I did see something where I guess the G7 was suggesting that if any one country stumbles across a vaccine, to share with other countries, not to hoard it and keep it to yourself. So hopefully we see that generosity among countries. Whoever finds the first vaccine, it's shared with everyone.
Which is pretty much what it looks like most governments on the globe right now is on that same page, except for Trump, who literally tried to buy a monopoly on the vaccine from the Germans, and the Germans are really mad about that one.
Yeah, the fact I couldn't believe until I read a Reuters report that came directly from a statement from the German government confirming that not only had the Trump administration attempted to purchase this company, which is fine, but they had attempted to then prevent that company. If they had been purchased, they would have prevented them from sharing their work with anyone but the United States, and that is particularly heinous to me.
Anyone followed up on the Australian thing where they are actually looking at some experiments with a new treatment that they might actually be able to roll out for the masses?
Are you talking about prophylaxis?
No, I don't think so.
Because there has been stuff that's passed around about using prophylaxis in order to possibly to quote unquote do what they're talking about, which is flatten the curve. I don't know if maybe you guys have already talked about it, but Jesus, what was it called? HCQ? Hydrochloroquine. That might be what you're referring to, the 600 milligrams a day of hydrochloroquine. Because it's interesting that they had suggested to do this. It's something that because they do that with HIV patients, right? Where they'll give them, especially those who are, or sorry, not HIV patients, but people who are at high risk for HIV. They'll give them a prophylaxis in order to significantly to reduce the chance of them getting the disease later on down the line. I think there was a small study test done where they did a 7-month test to see if the disease would reduce the spread. And I think it did. I think that was like somewhere between 90 and 95% of patients who were on the prophylaxis ended up not getting the disease versus the control group, like almost 100% of them ended up testing positive in the same conditions. So it'd be interesting to see if maybe they actually end up if they expand on that a little bit, especially with like healthcare work.
I just linked the thingy in quarantine. I just stumbled upon it yesterday. I haven't actually dug deeper into the actual science.
Yeah, I just dropped that link into chat. If for those not in Discord.
Yeah.
I'm seeing something else in the news. Amazon suspending all non-essential shipments to warehouses. Have you guys heard about this?
Yeah, actually, so my wife works. She has an online business with Amazon. So she gets all of her stuff from United States suppliers, and they basically said we're not taking any of your shipments anymore, which is really crappy because that's her job, and not being able to ship stuff to Amazon warehouses is tragic, and it's gonna put a pretty enormous strain on the Amazon supply network, and you're gonna start seeing a lot of stuff in Amazon be completely out of stock, even some of the stuff that you would normally see on a regular basis. They don't say what drug it is in this particular article. Don't talk about it at all here.
And Venom, no, that was my wife, isn't a healthcare provider.
Those people are heroes right now. Jesus Christ, they're busy.
It's certainly an interesting feeling clearing out your desk, knowing that you haven't been fired.
Well, I'm glad to hear you were not fired. There's a lot of people who are getting laid off, especially in the U.S., because companies can do that. They can just lay you off with what's going on right now. So people going out of work during this time is especially difficult.
It's going to be especially interesting when this is all said and done, or at least it's like coming to a close. How many excuses that people are going to throw out there as to why remote working from home just isn't feasible or just doesn't work, when in reality a lot of the same companies are probably going to continue to be a lot of these workers could work from home. Obviously there are exceptions to this rule, but when I was watching a news outlet this morning, I was listening to a pundit say that if people don't go to work, then there won't be a work culture. There won't be a quote unquote office culture. And I've got to tell you, from somebody who's been working in an office culture for just over 20 years now, it can get especially toxic sometimes.
I do think that on the flip side of that there is something to say for having actual human contact, at least on a regular basis, because I think working from home is not necessarily something that will suit everyone, and I think it would just potentially create more and different types of stress, right? I'd prefer to see people move towards a shorter work week and then put some of the remote work on a flex thing.
Yeah, it would be kind of cool if they did like 2 or 3 days you should come into work, but 2 or 3 days you don't come into work.
Or we could just start the actual work day later. That would be so nice. Could we move it from like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning to like 9, 10 o'clock every day?
Yeah, so my company started doing that, where we work, where they have just across the board, everyone can work from home half the week and the other half in the office. And you're right, Caleb. When you work from home completely 100% of the time, you do lose that human interaction, forging those relationships with coworkers by face-to-face time in the office. However, during this crisis, I think it's going to be difficult because it's not just people working from home. If you have that option now, it's work from home with all the children at home, and that could be distracting.
It's also work from home for people that aren't necessarily set up for that, or aren't experiencing that, or have an IT department that isn't, capable of supporting them, or that their position wasn't designed to be done remotely initially, but they're forcing it out. So normal work from home situations are carefully considered and well planned, et cetera. In theory, I feel that a lot of the man hours that we're getting out of the work from home people are going to be lower quality hours.
Yeah, and also one of the things that I'm seeing right now is okay, the kind of opportunistic businesses that are already doing the packaging of stuff that you need for a home office. It's kind of fun, but it's also a fact, right? Because even though we consider ourselves massive nerds in this household, Mrs. actually went and bought one of those packages and repurposed one of our rooms for an actual home office, so she can mentally split between working and spare time, right? Because if you start mixing these two, you start having this slide thing, and then it becomes almost like an extreme presenteeism where you're potentially working 18 hours a day.
So Look Backwater said that in his state or her state, they closed down the election too. Which state is that?
What is Tuesday? So I think probably one of those. It's like the minor Super Tuesday. I think.
Ohio.
Ohio is not exactly minor. They have quite a few delegates.
Ohio is an important state. It's an extremely important state.
I caught part of the Trump's update today. I didn't catch the state, but I heard that they had been pushing it. I guess they pushed out a couple months to June or something in terms of the election.
For the you talking about for the primary?
Right. Today is supposedly one of the Tuesdays where a bunch of states are having their elections for primary. And it's Ohio. The governor has postponed it. I heard also that there's a court case now in Ohio against the governor for doing that. That is already spun.
Oh, by the way, can we take a minute to appreciate the irony of the whole boomer versus millennial thing? That if this thing and the quarantine persist for more than months, right, we might actually see another era of boomers, because that's how the boomers were made. Right, the baby boomers are from the actual war period where people didn't have anything else to do than to either shag or whatnot, right? When we had the blackouts.
So a shooter says you work in hardware and they want you to work 2 days from home. Have you ever heard of virtual machines, virtual hardware? You can do that remotely.
Yeah, but you can't really sell those, can you?
It's all software now. Of course you can do it
Yeah.
remotely.
Well, I mean, the vast, vast, vast majority of electronic resources can be accessed remotely based on our existing compute and storage centralized in data centers and our telecommunications networks. All of the components exist, but the problem is that the products that sit on this, like for those white box branded virtual desktops and all these remote cloud-based software solutions, a lot of that is not quite mature enough, the usage of these technology pieces. So slowly but surely we're getting there, but again, we can't just say, well, now we need it a lot more, so we're just going to use what we already have that isn't so mature, and we're going to do it anyway, and it's going to kind of work, and we're going to find this is going to be when we find all the problems and fix them. Necessity mother of invention again.
Shooter, no one's running on Windows 2000. That's so old.
I mean, he says you'd be surprised how many companies still run servers with Win 2000, and I mean, I would be surprised, or maybe I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's more than ought to be, but yeah, obviously for the most part they're gone. And he is right that virtual infrastructure obviously rides on hardware. However, the the simple amount of hardware that is required for a virtual machine is much less. I mean, that much is obvious. We know that we can take a physical box, one single piece of equipment that is not very large, and that one physical box, which one might expect to be a desktop computer running one operating system, that same electricity and the same components and technology and everything can run multiple virtual machines. So obviously, there's less physical work required to maintain this stuff. Additionally, the more virtual something is, the less you actually have to touch it overall. Virtual networking, virtual, operating systems, all of this stuff is makes it such that bare metal access, physical boots on the ground, is far less required than has ever been before. But obviously, it's not completely eliminated. That would be crazy. Also, what Archmatic says, he says he works for a managed service provider, which is also that's my job. So I definitely understand what he's talking about. And he says they sell hosted remote desktops as a service, and there's a lot of these services out there. Um, None of them are particularly mature, but some of them are rather usable. The private cloud versions of these are actually rather reliable. It's the public ones that you can just buy on the internet and and rent that are less so.
Yeah, I have to say though, with my whole company going to VPN, working from home over the weekend, my company VPN's been stable, not a single problem. I've heard other companies have not been so lucky.
So so for anyone that doesn't actually understand this terminology, I'll just clarify. So Araya described a VPN, which means that he was using his own or a work computer or whatever, a local machine. He was using a physical computer that was in front of him that had the software installed on it and all of that. And a secure link to a remote network was created. So you're running Microsoft Word on your computer that's sitting in front of you, opening a document, and the document lives physically in the office or in the data center. That's what a VPN will provide. A virtual desktop, however, is an actual physical piece of equipment that is located in the office or data center, and the desktop environment runs there, and you just get a video of it on your computer essentially. And that is the difference between those. So it's VPN is the quote unquote tried and true methodology. It has been used for many years. It has its strengths and weaknesses, but the new hotness is virtual desktops, VDI, as Archmatics is talking about. That is the way things are going.
Some of us will claim that that technology is already like 10 plus years old, right? It's just that the laggards have not actually caught up yet. But it's one of the things that I really like about this period. Everyone is just doing this rush to actually catch up, right? So they're getting onto the actual real services that they need and should have done like ages ago. They are doing bug fixes of things in their processes that should have been fixed ages ago. Arya just said that his VPN is stable, but quite a lot are not up to snuff when it comes to capacity, and they have to then do almost like real physical load balancing, where people actually go on at different times of the day, right? So we're just seeing so much adaptation in real life. This is very much, I said, this is almost as if the real world got some sort of CCP design patch, right? Going harden the fuck up and get with the program. And everyone just needs to hurry on and actually adapt, right? So,
well, yeah, I mean, this is human nature in a nutshell. We only do when it's do or die. If things are fine, if things are okay, if the people who have the power to affect change are comfortable, then change will not be affected. The only time anything ever changes is when the discomfort level is high enough. So when people don't know about the new technology that's available to them and they have accepted the technology that they are using, then they will not look for the new technology. And you need visionaries to, to change that, or a lot of time, or a lot of time.
I'm looking forward to seeing the effect of what I've traditionally called conveniently inconvenienced. Because one of the things about this whole working from home and using digital platforms and all of that jazz, of course, as Eve players, we know a lot about these things, but the rest of society don't really realize how much the fact that when you are using digital platforms all the time, it's not really that much of an effort and a nuisance to help people, and you can escalate very expert problems because you are not limited in time, because you don't have to bang on someone's office door, right? You can poke them and actually get them to take care of a very specific problem, and there is so much extra time in people's lives that will start showing up in the efficiency numbers.
I mean, if there's a company that's using SneakerNet for ticket submissions for trouble tickets, then I pity them. Like that does not sound wise. But as you described, yeah, I don't know. You got to knock on some organizations. Their tech support means knock on the guy's door, and like that's kind of old style and gone away, but it really hasn't. It's still out there quite a bit. My company displaces those employees all the time. There's a company that has a guy or the two guys, and you knock on their door and then you wait for them to help you, and they put it on top of the pile, and then eventually they get to it, or maybe they don't. And we replace that because we have a ticketing system, and you click a little thing on your computer and it takes a whole diagnostic report and then asks you where it hurts. And then we get that email with all the information, and then and then you get a notification saying there's someone going to call you right at this time. And that first call isn't going to be the tech that's going to solve your problem. It's going to be someone who's going to help you triage and diagnose, and if it's really simple, they will fix your problem. Otherwise, they'll escalate it. And it's just like this whole very well organized system that has come to, and that kind of system adapts extremely well to geographic distance.
Yeah, and just to compare with what Shooter was talking about, with the fact that there's still people running on Windows 2000, right? This is an example of where the whole world is rushing to upgrade all of their procedures and all of their software and all of these operational things, right? I was talking to Matterall yesterday about how I kept trying to get university people to actually move to use a platform like Discord, because Discord is the most recent generation technology when it comes to virtual presence and community social management stuff, right? It's so much better in functionality than Slack. You can start a long discussion about downside and upside, but the main thing is that the rest of the world is now realizing we need to get up to the same level as the end level or the early movers, right? And that is happening right now at a tremendous speed. And I think you will see the effect on that on the other side. It might even offset a lot of the economic damage, because the productivity levels and at least the prognosis into the future will be so much better when people have actually gone and done this.
Absolutely. We always, I mean, I guess I could boil this down in a nutshell to whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And in this case, it's holding true. This is not going to kill the human race. It's not going to kill our society. We're not all going to perish over this. And it will have taught us lessons. It will have taught us that you have to take infection seriously, but you also cannot take it overly serious. You cannot panic. We have to have the systems, the technology, and the policies, the social policies, governmental, everything has to be in place in order to minimize the impact of these simply uncontrollable things. All we can do is buffer against them.
So Look Backward mentions one of the most gripping videos he's seen is the something from Italy, and I have to agree. That's the stuff coming out of Italy, whether it's the obituaries in newspapers or some of the interviews with the hospitals, are really gripping. And I think as that becomes more available for folks and they digest that material, that's when this starts to become really real for them.
Yeah, and just to go back to do the big red boat argument, right? If you look back at World War II and World War II technology, all the stuff that came out of there was pretty much aimed for, well, destruction and war, right? But it took about 10 to 20 years for that technology to transition into utility that is basically the swords to plowshare narrative, right? That took about 20 years. This is why we have these computers that we are playing around with today. I'm just kind of interested to see what is the potential knock-on effect going to be on a positive side from this crisis, right? What technologies are going to emerge and be developed that will then be utilized from the bottom up for social aspects of human society, for actual real productivity and plowshares, right? I think it could be massive and almost on the scale of what we had with World War II. I know that might sound crazily futuristic, but I really think that what we're seeing is these things are coming together and aggregating in a way that has not been seen ever before in history.
Yeah, we don't get poked this hard usually. And granted, this is again not the end of the world, but this is a pretty sharp poke, and I feel like it's going to get us moving to a good velocity.
I do wonder how long this is going to. We're going to live in this situation. I know my company in a lot of states in the U.S. is talking about the end of the month, but then you're starting to hear the message that this thing's going to keep ramping up until as well as July or August. So is this the new normal for the next few months?
So what's interesting is let me actually see. Uh what was talked about that image that was shown, uh how how they intend to deal with the pandemic as a whole, to to bring the top of the curve down and to delay the peak, reduce the peak and delay the peak. That strategy will create a smaller load on the healthcare system and prevent going overload and people dying, but at the same time it definitely extended the length of time that we were within this pandemic.
Well, I think my take is that we will be in uh, COVID era for about 2 years, right? But it's going to be in different phases, and the first phase is going to end in like between 2 and 4 weeks from now, and that will hopefully mean that most have successfully brought the curve down and flattened it enough to then start figuring out how to ready for the next one, so the second bump, so to speak, because this thing is not going away. But what I suspect will happen is that all these things that we just mentioned, the positive thing and the necessity being the mother of invention, all of that will mean that someone like the guy that's trying to do an actual multispectral vaccine, and he's actually already got the first science in, but he's got problems with funding. People like this, people that actually have the solutions, or the scientists crunching the data, finding out what to actually do and how to prepare for the future, or the new budgeting, or the increases to healthcare capacity and all that stuff. All that's going to start happening before the second bump, right? And I think that then it will be an entire season, and then they should be at a point where so much has been rolled out that you can almost say this is a non-issue anymore. It's not going to have any economic consequence, except of course for the policy changes. That's my guess.
I just
But
put
a lot of the delays are
sorry.
2 weeks. So like students are sent home. There's no school in the U.S. for a lot of places for the next 2 weeks. But that can't be a long-term answer, can it? No school for the next 4 months, or do we have to go to some other system of saying, well, this is the new norm, so we have to change how we are doing things? Maybe that means remote schooling.
We need to change
for all
everything,
grades.
and that's why I said it's almost going to be a 2 year period. I suspect what we have right now everywhere is pretty much just the hunker down. Just brace yourself for the punch in the face, and then on the other side, you're going to start seeing these the degrees of success, and then of course people are going to be crunching numbers left, right, and center. But I do think that we are already seeing that the whole global community is picking up the baton and actually doing stuff, right? They are being really effective in collaborating and sharing information. And I think that's going to shorten the impact of this tremendously. This is why I'm saying you will start seeing really good solutions on the table within a year. Some will say that they have some of the first steps already by April, May, I think, is what I saw. But of course, they're going to be what I would consider calling emergency solutions. The long-term things need to really think a little bit bigger. This is why, and this is not really politicizing, but this whole catastrophe is teaching the whole global community. First of all, this is one planet. And second of all, the reason that social policies are good is because they insulate us. And it makes it so much easier to lift the burden of these things, whether we're talking about things like pandemic preparation, help, even things like meteorite impact, climate change, sea level rises. We need to do this in a big way in groups and from a national level, because you can't say, oh, the private market can handle everything. Yeah, but they're not going to do this, because these things are not something that makes sense for a private actor. This has to be a community and a government thing.
Yeah,
So
my
if anyone,
my father mentioned that he remembers a time when he would go to the gas station. Gas stations were being rations. You can only go on certain days to get your gasoline, and there was some sort of
yeah, the gas lines.
rationing of it. So I'm curious if we're going to see that, where if you want to go to the grocery store, you can only go Monday and Thursday, and then on a different day, there's different folks who can go. I'm curious if we're going to start seeing something like that in terms of places start to open up, but your time and when you can go is rationed out so that you're avoiding large groups of people.
And just to take this out of the traditional left-right policy ideology argument, this is like war, right? This is very much like a crisis situation on the same scale as a war.
Well, this is a fight
In the
against an
fact that
implacable foe.
exactly, and this is also why what always happens in war is that the first step is what's considered martial law, right? The fact that you implement these things, and martial law is fundamentally communist. That's what it is. It's totalitarian. It's top down. You don't have any of the same rights that you do in normal peacetime, right? And this has already proven itself that that is what you have to do when you're dealing with crisis. So this is not about commies or pinkos or all that jazz. This is about what you do in a crisis. You have to do it from the top, because there is no way that market forces are going to make these changes. That's just not what they do.
Yeah, no, we have to bottom line it, recognize what's important, and sacrifice choose individually to sacrifice freedom for safety.
Yeah, it's extreme utilitarianism, right? This is
Yeah.
we have to do this for the sake of the whole body, and that is the fundamentals of the actual ideology behind communism. The fact that it's never been implemented in an effective and positive way is because sic semper tyrannis, right? Tyrants are always going to mess shit up. But again, this is why the narratives from the people that actually survived and lived through World War II is relevant now, because that reminds us of why we can do stuff like this without it being tyrannical. And then we just have to figure out how to moderate that when we go back into peace period.
So Crazy Loca mentioned something interesting in chat. He pointed out that there is a distributed computing product that is targeted at medical research and disease, computing. For anyone who's unaware with what distributed computing is, it's if you may have heard of SETI at home or other things like that, where people will download a small program that they run on their computer that watches when they're not using their CPU, and when the CPU is available and their internet connection is available, it will download chunks of data from a server and chew through it using your CPU and then send it back for the good of the whole. So SETI at home is something that processes, astronomical data to look for extraterrestrial intelligence. That's what it stands for, extraterrestrial intelligence. And Crazy Loca mentioned Folding at Home, which I've linked in chat, which is a distributed computing product for researching disease. And apparently, they have now gotten data that they need to process that may potentially be helpful in the fight against COVID-19.
And this is one of the examples really in chat, right, that I kind of like. And the fact that Look Back War says some stores are open for seniors the first hour of opening hours. This small thing, right, it's such a good idea, and it should really be shared everywhere, because this is the kind of solution-based things that we really need at this point in time, right? And as the faster that the governments are sharing these potentially effective ways of handling stuff, the faster we're just going to get through this.
Yeah, definitely. The less abled first is a very very good concept that I think that we should all take a lesson from.
Yeah, and also the fact that you are dedicating it only to them, so they can avoid social contact with the people that can potentially infect them, right? So it's just a smart little thing. Why didn't we think about it?
Yeah, I mean, so you have a less abled individual. So not only are they less able to help themselves, they are also less able to prevent themselves from harming others. So it is simply good policy and prudent to get these less abled people the help that they need directly and first, and get them out of the way so they don't cause problems for others and they are taken care of and have what they need. Did Mannerall have to leave or just step away?
He stepped away. He left the baton with Araya.
Did we talk about Eve stuff today? Are we going to talk about Eve stuff
We,
today?
we, we should. They've actually asked us in chat to maybe cover the new patch, and I do think it looks interesting. It's just I perused it, and the one takeaway that I was interested in was the fact that it looks like they are going to roll out an iteration on the experiments they did with the loot fairy algorithm. It looks like they're going to implement that in a new version in LowSec, which is really interesting.
You missed the biggest thing, the thing that everyone's going to lose their minds over. Gate sliding is officially back.
So can you explain what that is?
Yeah.
What gate sliding is, why it was taken away, and why it's back again.
Yeah. So gate sliding is the process of landing on the gate to get into a faction warfare combat site, which are the sites that are used in faction warfare systems to capture the system. Players were able to warp to the site, land on the gate, activate the gate, and enter the site without anyone on the outside being able to tackle them. And this was important for supporting the faction warfare gameplay. This was an accepted practice. It was emergent gameplay, and all of the players liked it and felt that this was balanced and appropriate because they wanted you to be able to be unmolested going into this particular combat site where you contest the faction warfare system. There was a problem, though, in that players were fitting ships with certain cheese fits, which included warp stabs, inside these combat sites, inside these faction warfare complexes, and that was unacceptable to the player base and to and to the developers. So their fix for this was to disallow warp stabs, a ship fitted with warp stabs, to enter these faction warfare complexes, these combat sites. The way that they did this mechanically was to add a split-second check on the ship's fitting when you activate the gate. And this split-second check broke gate sliding, such that you could not land on the gate, enter the site without being tackled. And people were getting tackled outside these sites, and no one liked it. And they thought long, and the devs thought long and thought hard about how to restore this functionality. And if you read the patch notes, you can see how they'll be bringing it back. And there are a lot of people who are going to be very, very happy about this. It had been, this had been, this was a foregone conclusion. Rise himself has stated on multiple occasions that they accept and support the concept of gate sliding. They know that they broke it, and they will find a way to bring it back. So they are now making good on their word.
And this is just another example of the feature that I mentioned, right? This is CCP doing exactly what we've been begging them for ages, iterating on things that we really want and need.
So I have a question about this then. So a gate sliding coming back, do you have a scenario where you could activate the gate, quick fit a warp core stab, and then be able to go inside your Plex with a warp core stab?
No, there's once it performs that check, the next thing is send you in. I'm not sure if you can refit while in there. I wouldn't even know. That would be a question for Ash or someone else in Faction Warfare.
Because this sounds like the wormhole check, right? This is the whole idea. I click jump on a wormhole,
Yes.
then turned on my MWD, so now I'm a much larger mass, and they got rid of that, saying that's an exploit. You're bypassing a check. So by giving us gate sliding, could I actually refit after I hit? I'm assuming when you hit activate the gate, you have the normal acceleration. It takes a couple seconds to go through the gate. So can I hit jump on the acceleration gate, put on my warp core stabs, and just coast in there?
Well, you'd need a depot for that, and that takes time to deploy, and you've only just landed on the gate. So you need a minute to deploy the depot so that you could refit. Not to change topic, but Venom Sense mentioned something in chat. He said, remove wounds from high sec. It's the stupidest, most unbalanced thing ever. Literally thousands of players AFK mining, no risk. I have good news for you, Venom Sense. CCP is redesigning the entire resource system, all of it. It's all going out the window, and they're building it all over again, and we are in the beginning stages of that now. So I would advise you to keep your ear to the ground and see where things go.
Yeah, they just to clarify, because earlier someone asked why they hadn't actually hit yet, and if I'm not mistaken, this has something to do with the whole fracking timer thing. So to make sure that the transition from the old system to the new doesn't impact a lot of people and the servers don't go belly up, I'm pretty sure that what they might have done is they have pretty much looked at the current timers about to come out and then figured out what was the best way to add the new system to the next phase of their fracking frequency, right? So all the fracks that are now about to come out will be the old system, and the ones that are the following one has already been fitted to handle the new normal, right? So I think that's the tech issue that they had, and I think that's one of the things that were discussed at the CSM summit, because it was a bit of a, have you remembered to consider this little issue? And I think CCP just went, oh, wait a minute, we better go test that so we don't break everything. So I think that's why we didn't get the moon changes where we were expecting them.
Yeah, and what we do know is that everyone that we've spoken to on the CSM is rather pleased with CCP's plan going forward, though they obviously cannot disclose any details. The mere fact that the CSM likes it is meaningful, because they don't like anything.
Oh, and of course, in this quarantine period, there's a little bit of good news on the EVE Media side. This weekend is going to be kind of packed with CCP devs interviews, so you've got something to look forward to. It's going to be pretty much end-on-end devs on INN.
Yeah, this weekend is also what is it? Twitch versus EVE. Streamfleet is running an event in which there will be 5 fleets full of your favorite Twitch streamers flying around asking to get killed.
The only thing that could make this a really glorious week in EVE Online would be if Kill 2 locked onto Twitch and streamed for a few hours.
From your mouth to Bob's ears.
Seriously, it would just be such a nice thing to sit and chit chat and smack talk at Kill 2 while he was streaming, aka CCP Rise. That would be glorious.
I would very much love to see Kill 2 ride again.
Yeah, and he can do the wingman and get Bram Stoker to fly with him. Not that.
I've seen some of those videos, and every time I see it in scope video, Bam's dying. So I don't know if he's a good wing.
I didn't say he was going to be a good wingman, but at least he would potentially be comic relief, right?
Oh no, the best wingman is the one that dies for you.
It'll be his Sancho Panza thing.
Let's see what else is in this patch.
Well, I think Fansui, I think you should pick up the thing a little bit that I mentioned, the loot fairy, because I think that again proves very much the fact that CCP are being really serious right now about what they iterate on and in what order and what priority. I'm not saying they're perfect because CCP does not understand the term perfect, but I seriously think that these things are very well considered, even though they might not land perfectly. The fact that they're actually using the experience that they got from the Loot Fairy weekend to actually do an iteration and then implement it not globally because that would just mess things up, but actually put it on LowSec first to see what that does. That's just so smart. And if you look at the patch size, right, it's not doing the thing that we claimed that they were making mistakes with earlier, where they bring in too much change so they can't get good data. They bring just enough change so they can actually get good data. That's just really nice to see.
It seems like they're doing the LowSec what they're doing the NullSec, where they're making very measured changes. We're not getting a brand new faction warfare system. We're not getting a brand new SOV system, but they're making changes, maybe tweaking numbers on resourcing, tweaking numbers in market, tweaking mechanics within faction warfare. We had the tethering change a little while ago, and now we're going to have this change today with the sliding on the gate.
I think that's really my takeaway right now. I know I'm starting to sound extremely positive, but between Rattati and Rise, right? Yeah, but between Rattati and Rise, what it feels like they're doing, and the way that the current patches are coming out, they are very dedicated to these small tweaks, which are fundamentally low hanging fruit, right? And bug fixes and plugging abusive holes and stuff like that, which is really low budget when it comes to dev hours, right? That means that they can put the excess dev hours on actually doing bigger things without feeling rushed.
So let's look at some of the other things in the patch notes. So you mentioned the loot drop. So what we're going to see is LowSec loot drops will be increased, and LowSec warp speed will be increased between the 24th of March and the 6th of April. So this is going to make LowSec pretty damn busy, I think. The event, they say, so a while back, before the Skilling Was Just a Means event was released, we had looked at Hobo Leaks, and we had seen that there were 2 daily tasks that had been added to the game files. But after the event actually started, no one ever saw one of those 2 tasks. Everyone only saw the kill a Capsuleer frigate or larger for 10,000 skill points. I had postulated that there would be potentially 2 tasks a day for 10,000 skill points apiece, and it appears that that is what they're doing now, that they are adding the additional task. So that additional task, other than destroy a Capsuleer frigate or larger, is to destroy the NPC in the faction warfare complex.
Can I just take a moment to bring us back to quarantine and station and effects from the corona? Because I just got linked a tweet that is really one of the biggest things I've seen up till now, right? Cambridge University Press, one of the biggest academic publishers, just made all their textbooks open access. All of them.
That is fantastic.
That's like massive.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to all of these changes.
The frigates and battleships, is that coming out today?
Is it out? Let me check the patch notes. I think that they said
no, it's coming with the patch, soon. Right? It's coming with that patch.
Yeah,
why it's mentioned. So it's what 24th.
Okay, so yeah, so about a week from now, give or take.
Were there any mention of moon changes?
None
No, and
whatsoever. So I guess they're doing they do focused releases. They are trying very very hard not to uh not to just throw a whole bunch of stuff at us at once or even at the game. They're doing surgical strikes. They're making specific changes. This is the faction warfare quadrant, so that's what's going to be focused on. Also, it's possible that this is a Talos release. I'm not entirely certain. Um,
I think they
but
are related now. I think they folded them into each other because basically the ecosystem.
Ra and Talos.
Yeah, I think Ratati needed to get up to speed to actually then do Talos-like releases. So a week, 2 weeks, but they need to be fitted together, right? Because you should have something that's Ratati's focus and then something that's more Talos focused, and you want these things to be complementary, something that aids in the other release, right? So that's why you get something like Loot Fairy stuff and then sliding on gates, right? And then so I think what we're seeing now is because they don't want these too much in one patch, they're going to then do the pacing and make sure that these things fit each other when they actually release them. This is why, and there's so much actually down the line, I think, that's going to start happening because we also have the industry thing to look forward to. Because if I'm not mistaken, that was one of the big topics at the summit, right? How do you then do also some sort of iteration and change on industry? And we still have the Rorqual down the pipe, right? That is going to be fixed in some way or form. I'm not entirely sure where they're going to land. I just like the idea that Seraph had with splitting Orca and Rorqual into two completely different platforms. There's so many things happening. And then I think we're going to have to see a little bit of a shift in, I think, the frigate meta because of the fact that we now get them in these battleships. So you're going to see some sort of tweaking on that. And you're also going to, I think it's going to be a boost, right? Because if industry changes and currently capacity is hitting the frigate hulls more than everything else, so if that gets more valuable, it would make sense to also make them a little bit higher in utility.
I think that the ecosystem changes, the resource distributions and collection system, and all of that business that Rattati and Muppet Hunter are responsible for, that is going to be a process that is definitely iterative, but also extended, and we're going to see that going on for several months, maybe longer. And the Talos releases, which I'm not certain that this loyalty to Losec is a Talos release or not, but their cadence is going to be fast. So these things are obviously interrelated and they need to take each other into account. But I believe that that is the reason why this patch is just this and there's no mention of resources whatsoever. It's because that is in fact a separate thrust that is a much more long-term project. They mentioned, oh yeah, I guess we didn't mention the fact that they are adding a new faction warfare combat site. We kind of tangentially mentioned it. So there will be, they said this feature will also see new gated capture sites, faction warfare complexes, that allow entry for all ships of battleship size and smaller. This presents a perfect opportunity for capsulers to make use of the brand new and exciting frigate escape bay feature. So that's what we were talking about earlier. Not only will battleships be using frigate escape bays in general, but specifically in these brand new combat, complexes in faction warfare space.
Oh, and actually, the patch also have it's got another small thing that's also very much the current ideology since Hilma came back. If you notice the changes to the LP, actually, that's shifting towards more active
I intended to mention that.
Yeah, more active play styles and more PvP centric play styles. And then when you take that into account with the Loot Fairy changes, it's really pushing towards general active being more valuable than passive income gameplay, right? So they're really focused on this on every single aspect of the game. This is something that really made me happy, because it's the same with the fact that Rise and Team Talos is also focusing on this speed thing, this increase. They call it need for speed, where they want people to be able to actually get to activities and action faster without all this, call it travel or staging tedium, but in a way
I
that's
think the word
still
you're looking for
balanced.
is bullshit.
Yeah, but travel sometimes is valuable, because there's a downside to, say, if you compare to other games, when you start getting too many points and too many gates
Absolutely.
that can, because then you lose the immersion, you lose the feeling of being in the world if you can just teleport everywhere, right? This is one of the mistakes, and I do want the feeling of actually traveling in EO Online. I just think that they need to make it into a point where it becomes an experience more than me just feeling like I'm sitting there looking at the clock and saying, when am I going to
Sure.
arrive?
So they have, so obviously the Needlejack filaments have removed some of the necessity for travel for some players sometimes. Travel is obviously still a thing that people have to do, and it is, valid competitive gameplay. Just getting from point A to point B in EVE Online is competitive gameplay. I actually like to say that the act of creating a character, even if you never log it on, is, engaging in the competitive player versus player environment. Like anything that you do inside of EVE Online is playing a role, whether you want to or not. People are going to assign a role to your character. Your character has a role. They can point at you and look at your name and look at your race and the school that you went to and make them write a story about you, whether you want to or not. So you're playing a role, and you're also competing, whether you want to or not. If you create a character and never log in, you're competing and failing. Uh, so everything is PvP. but yeah, and what Crazy Loco mentioned and what you mentioned earlier was the faction warfare loyalty points being moved around. So they have moved them away from the missions, which was PvE, and they moved them into kills. So that is an extremely positive move.
And now I'm just hoping that Ratati might consider taking a look at all this LP store stuff and implement a ISK price point that actually follows what you would consider inflation in EVE. The fact that you need to have the nominal number of ISK cost follow the availability of ISK. The fact that we are still running on price models that are 10, 15 years old on some LP stuff is just really bad. But it points towards something that I think is relevant to Talking in Stations audience. If you go back and listen to all the Talos stuff and you listen to the Muppet Hunter interview, I think you're going to see that it looks as if all these three different types of developers and designers, so Ratati, Muppet Hunter, and Rise, right? They are trying to work in unison. It's almost like a little triumvirate. They're trying to make these changes that fit and will benefit everyone. So when you're talking about something like travel, right, it needs to Muppet Hunter, he would maybe focus on, it needs to feel immersive, as if you're actually traveling with a reason and an intent and an experience. It needs to have this exploration aspect to it as well, right? You will have someone like Ratati that says, "Oh, but there needs to be some cost and some risk in the game," right? So that's about bringing in, fees on gates and fuel costs and all of these things, right? So you balance out the risk of force projection if you start speeding things up. And then the last one is of course Rise, that needs to put in the potential player versus player aspect, the fact that you can disrupt and stop people's travel, you can intercept, you can basically assail their logistics, right? These are some of the things that are needed in the game. Exactly how they're going to be done, I don't know, but it looks like these three guys are now actually working together and trying to bring something out in unison.
Yeah, what we're seeing is Hilmar is back and his vision is clear, and the people that he is putting in the positions to make decisions for him are the ones that clearly understand his vision and the product that they are being charged with improving.
Because one of my favorite ones when it comes to logistics and shipping is the fact that you have this huge problem between jump freighters and freighters. Piloting freighters in high sec is actually a ton more risky than jump freightering stuff, right? Jump freightering is pretty much almost like free and almost safe teleporting around, whereas freightering is tremendous risk, and you have to do this speculative packaging that's pretty much back to last episode of TIS Today, where we talked about the guy that lost his entire blueprint collection. The fact that you have to only put like between 2 and 5 billion in a freighter to even be able to ship it around safely, it's just there's a mismatch in balance and risk versus reward, right? And the fact that we then have these what I would call artificial choke points like Uedama, it's just dumb. You need to have shipping lanes be fairly free of piracy. I am not
that's
against
going to happen
piracy
on its own, man.
Yeah, but I'd just like to point out that I am very pro piracy and destruction in Eve. It's pretty much what my play style depends on. So I'm very.
But you don't like shooting fish in a barrel.
And I don't like the fact that you can pretty much have this ever-existing choke point where if that was in real life, someone would put in actual security, right? Someone would go in there and kill all those pirates and completely remove them. Uedama is a mistake. I think CCP needs to figure out how can we stop or balance this Alpha Strike almost briefing-like PvP.
It's going to happen on its own, and here's the reason. Uedama emerged on its own, and it's going to submerge on its own as well. It emerged because the highways many years ago, the Uli market and the highways were destroyed, and the market resettled on Jita, and then there were other market hubs in the other, Omar, etc. And simply the act of going from one of these places to the other demands that you pass through Uedama. And everybody looked at the map and they said, well, when you go from this place to that place, what do you have to go through? What system, where's the pipe? And which one of those systems has the lowest security? And that was the answer. So by default, it emerged. And now what you and I, Caleb, have been talking about lately regarding the market changes is that we expect the market activity to be far more widespread, and other regions will start seeing more activity. So right now your problem of all roads lead to Uedama, so all the pirates are simply shooting fish in a barrel, will naturally resolve, not completely, but will naturally reduce itself. There will be less traffic to Uedama because there's going to be less shipping to Jita. People are going to be going elsewhere.
Yeah, but it also may create an incentive for CCP to, well, not necessarily bring back the highways, but say make sure that the main shipping lines, so the direct route from the different empire hubs, right? They should be fairly safe. There should not be this stupid yellow choke point in the middle of the route. That makes no sense, especially when
the pirates have to try.
Yeah, and I want them to be a little bit smarter, especially when you take into account this thing that we are potentially going to see more arbitrage in shipping going on because it's going to be profitable again. That means that smart hunting will be much more valuable, and that's going to also create a lot more good and emergent gameplay than what we have now, which is shooting fish in a barrel.
Anything that rewards the smart hunter, and let's next set of changes comes in, and all of a sudden what we start seeing is that whereas before this group of 100 people or 100 toons were getting lots and lots of kills, vaguely even, all in the same place, either in or next to Uedama, and then that change goes in, and after a few weeks we see now it's only 20 toons, and they're killing more, and the other ones are killing less. And what happened is, all of a sudden, the better gankers and the better pirates are being rewarded.
And this is also why I would potentially say that I don't see a problem with CCP doing something like forcing the safety lock for alphas. So you can't necessarily abuse alphas in high-sec PvP. If you want to do high-sec PvP and actually shoot newbies, you should at least be a paying customer.
I could see that. I don't know if I'd get behind it. I'd have to think a lot more about it. But like, all of these ideas are valid, at least for throwing it.
It's just because then you would see that the alphas, also new bros that want to get into blood sports, right? They would migrate to low sec, and we just got a low sec upgrade, right? So this would just make sense, in my opinion.
Sure. And so here's an interesting thing we can talk. The fact that Pirate and Co. will, war deck everybody in sight and, perch themselves on top of Jita 4-4 and literally farm people, like not actually PvP, just literally farm. And two sides of this. Like on the one hand, that sounds pretty crappy. That doesn't sound like fun gameplay for them. It doesn't sound like fun gameplay for anybody else. But at the same time, I really, really like the fact that Jita is so goddamn dangerous. Like you have to look out and you watch your ass. Don't do the wrong thing. If you're war deck, then you have to care. And like I myself have been forced into situations, have been placed into situations and punished that forced me to reconsider my methods. And I have come up with some very, very cool methodologies, ship builds, etc., strategies because I was forced to. So at the same time, feels bad, but also necessity is the mother of invention. So how do we resolve this?
Yeah, and I completely agree. War decking or existing under a war deck, and when there is aggression at play, should definitely bring on all that blood sport stuff, and it really is what drives the incentive to play Eve. The fact that you have to adapt to all these things. So I don't think that we should have some sort of nerf back to PvP, but I think that CCP should sit down in that triumvirate and figure out how can we make the PvP a bit more cerebral and smart, right? Make it fun for everyone. The best example is, of course, the war deck changes that we got finally. Something that people have been screaming for about 10 years because it was basically an abused mechanic. And finally, CCP saw that, okay, this needs to be fixed.
I really do think that any given activity in Eve would benefit from broadening the base, meaning at the entry level of that activity, that there's a lot more fun to be had, but not a whole lot of quote unquote a direct reward, and raising the peak up, so that when you start engaging, there's more fun stuff, and then as you progress and become more skillful, there is additional gameplay that you can add, additional tactics and strategies that will reward you, but you're not forced to the top of that peak because you could just stay at the wide base where there's more options and a lot of fun.
Maverick, were you trying to comment?
Yeah, guys. There's some very valid points, and especially over like the last 15 years, we're talking about the 15 years that I've been in Eve, and now I'm involved with like the Chinese and stuff like that. We're having fun. We're having fun with the PvP aspect of things. We're still having fun PvPing. I think it's just a case, like you guys are saying, it's kind of making it more rewarding and more.
Yeah, I want to reward dedication and skill.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with what you're totally saying there. Giving something back for the PvPers as well and making it more rewarding, that's something, yeah. But I would say we're still having fun. We are still pretty much having fun.
Yeah, and the fun never went away, really, right?
No.
Even when the game was fundamentally stagnant, it never really went away. But it would just be so much better if these designs were more intuitive. So when you come into Eve and you've never played it before, when these things happen to you or you start fiddling with it, it just makes sense, right? It's something that fits with what you would say is how it works in real life. I'm not asking CCP to build a complete and perfect simulation of reality. I'm just saying that at least some of the mechanism needs to be hooked in the same way. So when you come into Eve, you think, oh, that means I have to do this to get that result. And you're going to be right. You don't have to sit down and read 10 pages of guides or watch all these weird abusive mechanics of how you actually circumvent shit. The best example is, of course, when you're talking about travel, half of the features in shipping and traveling is basically players adapting and figuring out ways to abuse the system. The whole insta warp thing, webbing to to align fast. All these stupid mechanics that are basically abuse of the fact that CCP's math is bad.
One of the quotes that I like to repeat most often when someone says they're bored, I tell them, your lack of content is self-inflicted.
Exactly. Find more content, go and burn something.
So where do you fight, Maverick?
Right now, obviously, we've joined forces with the Imperium. So we live in Delph. So not giving away too much information. For what I know is we are still working within the Declan area. Still focusing pretty much some of our Chinese time zone forces on deck.
Are you expecting any changes to your Chinese time zone forces once Serenity is available?
Chinese, well, to be honest, I mean, it's a huge culture change for me working with the Chinese because I'm in the UK, they're Chinese. You know, when I'm active and busy and on fleet, they're kind of sleeping. Then when I'm asleep, and that, you know, fleet-wise, no, they're still doing what they're doing. Activity-wise, it's still there.
Well, for now, I'm saying Serenity isn't open yet. It was just announced.
Mm-hmm. We're not going. Yeah.
So you don't think you're going to lose any of your Chinese players?
Nope.
It's funny because that seems to be the general opinion of most people that I have asked.
Yeah.
Even though when I think about it objectively, knowing nothing about these, it seems that a functional local server that they're legally allowed to use have to go through a VPN, don't have to deal with lag to participate.
I mean,
be good.
Right now, the kind of things obviously we are struggling with, and I'm working obviously with Ranger Regiment and the other groups, you know, Iron Crown. You know, the VPN thing, yes, we're trying to find a way to bring everything together because there's a lot of people that can't use Mumble. There's a lot of people that can't use the services that we've been using for years because of VPNs. So right now we're trying to find obviously the connection that kind of just brings all the time zones together. At the moment, yes, it is hard, but we're getting there slowly but surely. It's just a lot of testing going on, etc., etc. I mean, the Chinese use other programs on top of programs.
What do you think it's going to mean when Serenity launches? What do you think the effects are going to be?
It really comes down to kind of how the groups, you know, obviously a lot of things have happened over the last few months. A lot of things have been put in place. So for everyone just go, right, okay, the server's open, see you later. It's been good having, you know, I think that would, I don't see that being a case. To be honest, there's definitely no talks in the Chinese community and the leadership wise. There's not really any talks regarding kind of shifting the back to where it was. I think everyone's pretty much very happy with the way things are going and the server that we're on. So there's definitely been no talk within three of the Chinese alliances that I work with.
I want to know what Kangoo is talking about. I think he's saying that someone doesn't have a valid opinion. Said someone with less than 500 kills talking about PvP. Who are we talking about? And yes, Ash, get in here.
Okay.
Hi Ash, how you doing today?
Well, now I got to go check my kill board to see how many kills I have to see if I'm eligible to speak.
Oh yeah.
I bet this dude just checked mine, which is non-existent. Maybe he doesn't understand the fact that when you're specializing in other gameplay styles, you don't touch that aspect anymore.
Fonsui has exactly one.
Yeah, I have one kill. I got it yesterday on my main that you know about. I have a lot of other tunes. Like, yeah, you may be able to look up Caleb and see no kills, but who the fuck knows how many tunes he has? Give me a break calling people on how many kills they have. Maybe I'm doing this on purpose to make you think I'm not scary.
Oh, his point is valid. I have not been in any engaged fights for like 10 years. So he's completely right about that. That doesn't mean that I can't argue the values of PvP because that is what drives this game.
Well, I have
Yeah.
over 1,000 kills between frigates and cruisers, so I think that we're fine. No,
Well,
I'm just
Ash
kidding.
is allowed to talk.
Yeah, yes. Let's talk about faction warfare. No, I'm just kidding.
No, do please do.
Yeah,
I
you said
gotta cover this.
Yeah, Ash,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
gave
yeah.
a number. You said 65%. I want to hear how you got
I
to
just-
65.
I made it up. No,
No,
so
I know you were approximating. I want to hear your thoughts.
the main bullet points are Plex sites will now have different ranges for you to be able to activate based on what type of Plex this is. Now, this is a temporary change. They supposedly are going to be moving to one permanent number for how wide it is. And this is to experiment with different ranges. But I sincerely would like to encourage them to keep it that way, because having different named sites be different in different ways is actually kind of interesting to me. We've always had outposts and installations and compounds, but none of them actually mean anything. So the fact that they actually mean something again is kind of interesting. Second, and this is the big one, Plexes will now provide suspect flags upon entering. This does a lot of really exciting things. This is the number one most requested feature from Faction Warfare dudes, even before Citadels. Because the problem is that in order to go into Faction Warfare, not only do you have to kill your own standings and like make it so that you can't go into the other enemy high sec while you're in Faction Warfare, or possibly permanently, depending on how much you engage in like missions and stuff like that, but also pirates come in and you have to engage with those pirates, and so you lose your security standings. So in Faction Warfare, you eventually, all people in Faction Warfare on a long enough timeline become pirates. This fixes that. This makes it so that when somebody invades into your Plex, you can engage them regardless of whether or not they are Faction Warfare or not, which is huge and awesome. That change alone will hopefully rekindle Faction Warfare, because that's the biggest thing is that this is about how many people are engaging with it, not whether or not the mechanics themselves work. The mechanics work. People just need to care enough about system ownership to fight over it, right?
Your lack of content is self-inflicted?
Kind of. It is true that the actual mechanics themselves support like snowballing, and so it does kind of enter into this end state that we see right now. But either way, there's going to be a new type of Plex. So now, right now we have a large Plex, right? And large Plexes have no gates, so anybody can warp to them. Well, those Plexes are now going to be changed to what's called open Plexes. And a new kind of large Plex will be introduced that is battleships and down, which is crazy because it's always been a cruiser down experience in Faction Warfare, because medium Plexes are cruiser down, large Plexes are open. So the idea that I can now go out in a battleship to an area and I can run the smalls, the novices and smalls in my frigate, and then hop in my battleship because a frigate is gate bay, and start running larges in my battleship is awesome.
So what's a potential downside? So or not a downside, but like potential issues, things that need to be done and haven't been done, ways this can
Is
go
it going to
wrong.
be enough? The issue is that, like, so this really goes back to what I've been asking for.
Also answer Banksy, because I want to know the answer too.
The issue is whether or not we're going to have people care about warfare ownership. This helps make the warfare ownership system function better, but can we make people care about taking one system over another? Where's the question?
Do you understand what the slide? Did you understand what the sliding this was about? The size of the slide zone wasn't the issue; it was the stabs check, right? So
I understand that, but the issue is so I've actually had conversations with CCP about this, and so the question then becomes: can we fix it technically? Can we make a universe in which you can Plex slide and have this check for against stabs? And I'm confident that they're making this change is an indication that for right now, no. According to the code base and the physics of how New Eden works, if they had an easy solution to just turn back on Plex sliding, they would have gone with it. The fact that they went with this is a clear indicator to me that they were saying, well, what is the spirit? Why do people like Plex sliding? And the idea is that a larger ship cannot screen off indefinitely a whole bunch of smaller ships from getting inside of a Plex. And this change is an attempt to restore that value without necessarily restoring the literal mechanic of Plex sliding. Is it going to be enough? I don't know. Does this mean that Hugins are going to be really freaking awesome? Maybe. This is why I actually like the idea of keeping it at different ranges, so that way it's important to know, right? Like if you don't realize how far in or out someone can warp based on the plex, that's just another piece of information for someone who knows to use against somebody who doesn't know. So it'd be awesome if they could just put it back the way it was and still get no more plex or no more stabs and plexes. But we got to accept what we have and see whether or not we can work with it. As far as what I'd like to see, I'm still interested to see how this is going with the world news, because I believe that the Amarr and their attacks in that one system that starts with E is kind of a test bed. And so if they can create excitement and energy in specific systems or specific constellations, if they can make it so that it's valuable to own areas versus not own areas, either through system bonus changes, I think that's a big one that I would like to see is a reward structure revamp. That's the missing piece that I see here, because without the reward systems being looked at, all of these mechanics, they've been fixing slowly but surely these mechanics for faction warfare for months now. But none of them have actually risen to the point where players are like, yeah, now's the time to do it. Is an entire patch focused on it going to be the gunshot that people need in order to start the race? I'm not sure. We'll have to see.
Inside here.
Hi, Zed. So you're excited about these changes. I'm curious to see where it'll take us. They did mention a change to the reward structure in this patch, but I'm pretty sure it's not everything you wanted or even most of it. They are moving loyalty points out of mission, not entirely. They're moving a lot of the loyalty points out of missions and into kills.
This is good, but also makes me concerned, because the loyalty points into kill system was the system that the goons abused. So I would like to think that this is an indicator that CCP has fixed the thing that allowed the goons to abuse it.
Hopefully.
Hey, Lich.
Hey.
Any news from the front?
Yeah. Thoughts on today's patch?
I haven't even opened it yet.
I actually say on today's patch notes, my bad.
Is this the one that I'm looking at? Loyalty to LOSEC?
Yeah.
Got it.
Does this concern you in any way, Mr. By the way?
It's basically the CCP dev bringing a nice, pretty cake for Ash and his people, isn't it?
It is kind of what we've been waiting for.
Let me read, and then I'll
really
tell you whether or not this concerns me or not.
Comment from chat. I weigh 20 stone. Can I play now?
What faction warfare is really going to take, though, is that somebody taking over the state and going all Tybus Heth and being like, we can win.
I would say that if you weigh 20 stone and you have a beard, you're close, but you gotta be also living in a basement.
Nah, you're in the club. If you're rocking around looking like that, you're definitely in the club.
Okay.
I don't know. Do you have 500 kills?
I read
Yeah,
the thing.
yeah, that's right.
What am I supposed to be concerned about?
I'm a diplomat.
Whether or
I
not
show
you're
nothing
500
but
kills.
love.
No, Fonsui made a statement that I was concerned about something. Like, I
Oh
hadn't
no,
read the thing. Like, was I?
Oh no, I said maybe it doesn't concern you at all because it's not related to wormholes, which is your thing. It's a low-sec thing. I was just joking around.
Well, I mean, like Ash just stated, there's that abuse that goons did with the kills. So I mean, yeah, that's something to kind of like raise a head at. Being newer to the faction warfare scene, so kind of being like a newbie in that sense, I don't really see an issue with kills giving more LP, other than the fact that a lot of the kills that I get aren't faction warfare people. But that's beside the point.
What do you think about suspects coming into your complexes?
Are they suspects?
Yep. You can no longer enter a complex without activating a suspect flag, which also, by the way, will cause a lot of people to fail to enter into a plex because their safety is going to be green. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
But of course, now they have to be yellow in order to engage anyway. So it's just one last check. It actually helps you identify people who have safety set wrong earlier than the actual fight. I'm sure at least some people have gone to shoot at someone in low sec and then been like, "Oops."
Does that mean? Oh, that means I won't lose sec standing anymore, right? When shooting at people
That is
who
correct. You will be
That's
able to fire
that's
on
exactly the
anyone.
change that I wanted to see.
Yeah, I told you. This is the most
So-
requested feature in the history of faction warfare is suspect flags for people entering into complexes.
Yeah.
Now it's interesting because two things about that. One, I remember when I did my faction warfare discussions, one of the things I found really interesting was that there was a pretty good counter argument against this change by the pirates, saying that if this is true, then they would always be suspect, which changes the way they get fighting on plexes or on gates, like normal gates work. Which obviously they said that that's fine by making this change. But it was funny because all the way back in the early, back when I was doing Tweet Fleet Slack, we made a special channel for faction warfare revamp. And in it, the CCP dev who was starting the effort, who then got, moved off. And so that's the reason why it never happened. She said that the one thing that was guaranteed was suspect flags upon entering into plexes. So we finally got it, boys. 4 years late, but we got our faction warfare revamp of 2016.
If anyone is missing the Machariel Angel Hex skin, which is one of the most gorgeous skins in the game, it's going to be sold for 50% off.
That's nice.
So I guess if you have one stocked, sell now.
Also, definitely look into the Caldari Navy hook bill and the Caldari Navy or Kestrel Navy issue, or Caracal Navy issue. Both Vital Shift will probably be cheaper.
Yeah. So to read the full blurb, there will be 25% off selected skins such as Oasis of Faith, that's the new Omar line, Zento Isideco Combine, which is the new Caldari line, Snowline Blade Racer, which is the new Minmatar line, and Vital Shift Ego skins, which is the Caldari Premium line, for popular faction warfare ships like Navy issue frigates and cruisers. So that's why Ash was mentioning those two in particular. Secondly, the new Escapologist bundle will provide 4 stunning skins for popular battleships and 4 free frigate skins as well. Plus, there will be 50% off the Machariel's Angels Hex skin. So this, anytime skins go on sale, existing skins go on sale, the price, their value on the market drops. So it becomes both a very good time to sell and a very good time to buy these items in terms of investment. Is there anything else that we wanted to cover today?
Well, things are kind of happening live when it comes to the real life stuff. So, yeah, I don't know if we want to keep going or ask Matt also to shut it down. But I would actually like to.
So
I would like to just ask Ash before we decide whether he thinks I am completely overhyping things when it comes to the way that CCP seems to be doing things right now and how they're rolling things out.
I think that we're definitely seeing the payoffs from the setup of late last year, early this year. We're trying, I think that this is just one example of, kind of these high target items that have been being worked on, and seeing what kind of results we're going to get out of it. There is one more thing that I want to include, which is actually really interesting. So faction warfare in particular is an amazing place for new players and for alphas. Because you can lock people out of your plexes based on size, you can make sure that your opponent isn't a T1 frigate or no bigger than a cruiser or whatever it is. It makes it so that alphas can get out there and get a lot of work done for basically nothing. It's one of the best methods for faction warfare or for an alpha to make money outside of like exploration and stuff. And it is the only place in EVE where you can make money in a fully combat prepared ship that's designed to be done that way. So it is an amazing opportunity for newer players. That said, the skilling spree is going to be increased. So now not only will you get a kill for killing a player, which you can also do in these complexes, but you will also get the same reward if you kill the rat inside of one of these complexes, inside of one of the faction warfare gated areas. Kill one of those rats for another 10k SP, so a total of 20k SP per person per day.
Yeah, we saw these tasks added on Singularity and eventually on Tranquility. However, we also saw only one of them get added. We postulated that it might have been eventually both, and that is apparently what is going to be the case. Every single character is now going to get 2 10,000 skill points tasks every day for the remainder of the event.
So inside of these complexes, there's a specific rat that is spawned. It's only a single one. It is a DPS check, so they do low damage, have relatively high tank. By relatively high, I mean a novice complex is 100 DPS tank. And these guys are designed to stop the timer for people who are in faction warfare unless you kill them. So for you, or for pretty much anybody who's looking to do this, you just go inside and pop them real quick. If you're doing faction warfare, you will need to go into an enemy system in order to do it, because if you shoot at one of your own, you will gain faction standings lost to your own empire. So just find a complex, pop a rat, get some points.
What's your take on the moving of activity rewards from the more passive to the more active and PvP-centric aspects of the game?
Well, the call was to remove missions altogether, so I consider this a relatively big compromise. Although, if you listen to the introduction to New Eden, they literally describe faction warfare as PvP-centric mission running. So I doubt that they would actually remove missions outright. As I said before, faction warfare LP gains for killing other players was the exact system that the goons gamed in order to make just a stupid amount of money.
They knew how to make it scale unfairly in
Right.
an exploitative way, and that hopefully has been patched out.
Right, but it was their instinct, and this goes back to this thing that I said before, which is that faction warfare is the only content that is designed to give you money for doing PvP. And this is just reinforcing of that. Mission running has always been kind of looked down upon by people who are actually engaged in faction warfare, quote unquote, actually engaged, because mission running doesn't engage with the larger faction warfare mechanics at all.
It doesn't flip the system. It doesn't kill anybody. It's just the reward for holding the system.
Exactly. So I would like to see a larger reward revamp where we look at what kinds of items are accessible in each of the loyalty points, how loyalty points is distributed based on its tier, et cetera, et cetera. I would like a larger look at that in order to maybe better encourage, for instance, the state to get their act together and make a real go for it. But we'll just have to see.
So do anyone feel like talking a bit about the topic of to AT or not to AT?
Ooh.
Because I'm just thinking when I'm seeing sports events cancelled everywhere, and we might not actually get the Olympics this year anyway. So I'm just thinking, isn't this a good timing to see if we can't do some more esports?
So what we might...
I mean, if you were going to want to do tournaments in EVE, you would hire somebody like CCP Aurora. That's all I know.
Yeah, so that is a direction that they're clearly taking. Everyone knows who she is, what she's about, and all that. There are no promises made. Nobody has said anything, but everybody knows, what her thing is. That may take some time to come to fruition. If we want to see esports now, then we really should be looking to the EVE CS, the EVE Championship Series, which is run by the B Team Stream Team. They have a functional tournament. They are highly invested. They have technical resources. They have run tournaments already. They commentate them. They publish them on YouTube. And these are highly skilled players, fun commentators to listen to, and providing excellent content. And I think that a step towards legitimizing that or officializing that would be a step in the right direction, at least as a stopgap until CCP can spin up their own thing, or if they could simply adopt that as their own thing.
I mean, as a player base, it's easy for us to be like, bring back the AT. But if there is a really active tournament series and we're not supporting them, then that's a more clearer indicator, in my opinion. If I was a game dev, I hadn't looked at this, I'd be like, they just want us to spend a whole bunch of resources so that way they can just not like it too, right? So
let's support EVE CS. Let's show CCP that we want a tournament, and if they're not going to do it, then we're going to do it.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
Wait, hold on. That's too sandboxy. That's too emergent. That's too no. That's too emergent content. No, we can't. No.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Am I not inflicting?
No.
Am I not inflicting a lack of content on myself?
Oh no.
This is too emergent gameplay, man. I can't. No.
But yeah, I said, hit up DTM and Extra Squishy and 404 and watch them do their crazy.
But this is back to what I mentioned earlier about what would make my week would be if Kill2 actually logged on and streamed for a few hours and did so with Bram Stoker or something like that. But I'm just saying, isn't this the perfect time for CCP just to try and say, okay, we're just going to take advantage of the fact that now we have all these eyeballs, right? Now we can do these things, and it doesn't really have to be perfect, right? When it comes to them streaming or doing events, hell, I would love to see them consider doing some more live RP-based events, right? This is the timing to do so. You've got all these nerds sitting around potentially going, okay, is there going to be something interesting? Is there going to be some content and event stuff happening? Are we going to see some competition? Where are the entertaining streamers? All of this is like so obvious. This is now that we should get something like that. And it brings on the thing we talked about last week when we heard that FanFest was canceled. I'd just like to see CCP come out with an announcement saying, we're actually doing virtual FanFest 2020. That would just make my day. I don't know exactly how they're going to do it, technically, but I'm sure they could figure it out. And really, everything right now is excusable, right? No matter how much you mess things up or how low quality or whatever, everyone will just be able to say, well, this is not normal, guys. That's what you get when you have a crisis situation.
Yeah, it's better than nothing. And, and I'm sure that what they would put out would be good anyway. So they have mentioned, so in the last Scope video, they pointed out that the content that was planned for FanFest will in fact be released. I am hoping they do it, as you said, like a live event. I don't know if that's going to be the case partially or not at all. I guess that remains to be seen. But I know that the content itself that was going to be presented is definitely going to make.
So the story was gearing up to something huge, okay? When we last left our intrepid heroes, the Gallente presidential election has been suspended pending 4 simultaneous terrorist attacks on 4 of the 6 candidates. Rodin has basically put into effect martial law as they try to bring the systems under control such that they can enact a fair election for the peaceful transition of power, yada, yada, yada. And that's where we left off 2 weeks ago. So CCP was gearing up to be doing this huge thing that was going to ramp up all the way into FanFest, going to be related with all these faction warfare changes. The Yamar are firing off antimatter missiles out of submarines in Inglehide, I think it is. But like there's stuff happening, but then this happened and everything paused. There's been no new news updates since that moment. And at first I was like, oh, CCP not following through again, not giving us any promise based on like they hinted all these things and then don't do anything with it. And I think that the more I've thought about it a little bit, and I think that what's happened is that they've pulled back because their actual plan, their original plan, is gone. They can't do it. So now they just got to figure out where their new plan is going to go and then move in that direction. But basically, everything's primed for them to just point at what they want and pull the trigger.
Last time this happened, they found a little black book that solved all their problems.
And I'm sure Delegate Zero has just tons of plot hooks laying around that they could just wire into whatever. And then the Sancha attacks and everything gets disrupted. And I guess we're not having a fan fest this year.
Wasn't a player running for president?
Correct. General
Is he-
Juliana Soter was not one of the. He was one of the two candidates that were not attacked.
Is he assassinating everywhere?
It's possible.
I mean, that's some PvP right there.
I wouldn't jump on that, but who knows?
Or is it PV dev?
Well, the suggestion is that it's Mentis Black, and while no attempt on Juliana Soter was detected, that doesn't mean that there won't be.
Yeah, CCP has directly attacked players before as the system. I don't think that they've done it individually, except in the case of punishment like botting. But they
You
have.
mean like putting 50 old Plex on Lucas's head and telling everybody what ship and system he's in?
That. I was referring to Arc getting attacked, and I think Pi at some point was attacked.
Well, Pi attacked a Blood Raider fob, and they dropped 27 dreads on him.
Yeah, and that was CCP manually doing that, and Arc was also CCP manually engaging with them.
Arc has been attacked by every major NPC faction as part of the Triglavian Crisis. Concord, Drifters, Trig, and maybe that's it. Maybe it was just and Sancha.
This is CCP responding to the players' stated roles as they play those roles.
So CCP could be trying to assassinate.
Yeah, they may actually kill him at some point as part of the story. Obviously, they're not going to delete his character.
One person was actually already killed. She just got recovered from a backup clone, but it was an NPC still. That's the thing that's always been the most interesting about Julianus being allowed to run for president, because either A, he's going to win, in which case we now have a player functioning as an NPC commander of an entire NPC faction. How does that work? You know, does Julianus the character now have to pretend to go to meetings all day and give speeches and stuff? Or hold on. Or he loses, and we see how Mentis decides to make a player character lose an election.
Or Julianus is just in on the story and is intending to retire the character and turn it into an NPC, immortalizing it forever, and he'll just play another one.
He did say he'd give the character over to them to use during the time of presidency, I think I heard.
That makes a lot of sense.
Knowing Jules as well as I do, that makes sense. That would make sense to him as a person too.
I think that would be A, obviously that's unprecedented, but B, that would be super cool if CCP just took the guy's tune for his term and turned it into an NPC and then give it back to him after.
It'd be awesome, and then they fly it around for a bit too.
Now, to be clear, a term is 6 years, so
unless there's civil unrest during the period.
Exactly, he could be deposed.
Yep. Well, either way, what we do know is that there has been peace talks, and the powder kegs have all been laid out, and now it's just waiting for the explosion.
I'm gonna have to get into the lore.
The lore informs us what is going to happen in the game distressingly often. It is shocking, the kind of predictions that we were able to make, and the kind of things that we end up being right about simply by paying attention to the story.
Speaking of which, I'm still thinking that there's a solid chance that they're going to take away local in faction warfare low sec.
Yeah, so CCP does this thing where they telegraph their stuff out, and it's all tongue in cheek, and it's all in universe, and you kind of have to sort through it and filter through it and figure out what's real and what's not, and you never know. They have that plausible deniability of that was just story, but they do telegraph their moves this way. It's just impossible for us to suss out which ones are real and which ones are story
It's
before it
not
happens.
impossible, and this is where I would bring in one of the things you have to do if you want to do investment in EVE Online is you have to learn a strategy that's the positive and negative reading of information. Basically, because RP stuff and lore drives or leads some of the changes that's going to come down the pipe. What you do is you listen to someone like Ash Sharathi with a positive filter on, where you make sure that you correct for too much hype and too much tinfoilery, which gives you the actual conclusion, right? And the other one is you listen to the CSM and try to figure out what are they not saying, so the negative analysis. And if you do that, you will pretty much get a good idea of what's actually going to happen.
Yeah, and
I
so,
try to preface what I say with my confidence levels and why I might be
Yes.
confident in it. There are things that I've even said, it's like, okay, everybody, now take out your piece of tinfoil and make a second tinfoil hat to put on top of the first one, because we have literally left the tracks behind.
Do you use tinfoil umbrellas as well?
It can't hurt.
Because an Englishman always needs to have an umbrella.
Tinfoil umbrella sounds like a very risky behavior just on the surface.
I definitely I like how Caleb phrased it, saying that the story changes lead the mechanical changes, and that is precisely what they do. They're like, we're going to make this change, and we're going to work it into the story. A, because there is a story and it needs to match, and B, we wish to give some sort of vague wink or nod or telegraph to this before we do it, so the players who are paying attention will be rewarded.
I'd just like to point out that they've done this historically all the way back, but I feel like they've gotten a little bit better at doing it and hiding those leads in there the last 2 years or so. This is why I've just had some really good talks with Ash about this, and he's had a lot of these things where he gets the narrative and what it points to, but none of us can ever hit that spot where we get the correct prognosis, right? Because CCP always fucks with us, so they're always going to do a bait and switch in the end. So it's a good way of predicting things, but CCP usually don't give us exactly what we expected.
Yeah. So I think that with the release of the Abyss was really they're like, we are starting this to make the story interesting again after Caroline Starr, right? But the Invasions really saw the point in time in which CCP felt that the lore was important enough to be basically in everybody's face again. Because after that, you see drifter attacks, et cetera. But the other big turning point is, I think, EVE Vegas last year and around that time, which represented not only the formation of Team Talos, but a sophistication of CCP's understanding of what we can tell by reading hobo leaks. And rather than fighting and ignoring and moving past data miners, they've instead embraced the idea and have put stuff into hobo leaks that is clear messages to us in personally. They are able to hide information that would have normally have been exposed to maybe spoil secrets. So they're able to, and there's been some missteps. There's definitely been some times where they've tried to deploy something directly onto Tranquility instead of going through Singularity, so that way we wouldn't detect it, and it's ended up them being punished for that fact. But I think that we have really been.
What's that test faction for Trig Standing?
I mean, when they've come out with features,
So
for
one
instance,
example one example of what you just said, where they put something directly on Tranquility, skip Singularity, and that punishes them, is when the Observatory Flashpoint Triglavian invasion combat sites were added. Um, the Triglavians have a dreadnought, the Zernitra, and that is an NPC that you fight if you choose to fight the Triglavians. That NPC did the wrong type of damage. It was not set correctly. They're supposed to be thermal over explosive. That's what Triglavians do. This was doing EM over thermal because it had retained some stats from an NPC that it had been templated from. They fixed this. The developer in charge of this particular NPC and project went to Tranquility and patched it directly and changed its damage to what it was supposed to be. Then a few days later, the current patch that was staged on Singularity was then merged into Tranquility, but he had skipped Singularity. So the old stats, the incorrect ones, were then merged into Tranquility, thus breaking the fix that he had already put in, and then he had to go and do the proper process of put it into Singularity, wait for it to filter into Tranquility. So they're learning this just as we are. And again, as Ash said, they know how to hide things because they look at it and because they talk to us. They know what we can see, and we are helping them, tell the story in the manner that they wish. We don't want them to accidentally spoil something. That spoils it. That's why it's called spoiling. So when they hide things like the reindeer filaments being called ho 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 hobo leaks before they actually get a name, when what was the snark poem they put lyrics in there when the needlejacks are being
Well,
added?
there's what a terrible night to have a snark, but
Yeah.
they had all kinds of little snark references in all of
Yeah.
them. So yeah, we could tell you how many strings are involved, but we can't tell you what they are because they leave them as these default tongue-in-cheek, playful references that sometimes involve what the end result is. So it's actually a whole different level of clues and almost, but not quite bleeding into ARG level territory, right?
Right. So yeah, they're aware of hobo leaks and and what we get out of it, and instead of allowing that to trip them up, they have now utilized that as a tool for delivering the content.
That being said, I want to be clear. At no point am I indicating that CCP has had like some weird generational storyline that we're marching through, and today we're on this chapter and tomorrow we're going to be on the next chapter, and if for some reason we were able to get a hold of that Bible, we would crack it open and we would know exactly what's going to happen next and all of the features for the next little while. That's not how it works. That's not how storytelling works at all. Basically,
They're riding this wave just ahead of us.
right, they leave hooks and they pick them up, right? So just because something doesn't have an answer doesn't necessarily, like, they may not have the answer. They may have the answer. Like, there may be, what is the space bread used for? That answer may not exist. They may just have decided that they may in the future need this thing that is already been in the game for 5 years and we've been slowly collecting without any purpose. And someday, some developer is going to be like, I need a use for that. And they'll pick it up and then it'll be useful. And then everybody will be like, that's what it was the whole time. But that's just how storytelling works, man. So they leave themselves hooks. They pick them up. There's all these different characters and actors. Hell, when they went to LOSEC, they were like, we need a pirate group that isn't one of the popular ones, that might be working with the Sanchez terrorists, that would use missiles and hang out in LOSEC. Who would it be? And they had to go all the way back up to the Tempest Dragonar to pull up something that would work. But there they are. Now we've got Tempest Dragonar back in the story.
Yep, they set it up and knocked it down.
So you're telling me they're involved in emergent development like we're involved in emergent.
Oh, very much so. In fact, I mean, this goes all the way back to CCP Drop Bear and the Sancha live events, like way back in the day when they said that, the direction that the story went was totally different than what they originally expected, just based on the ways that players engaged with it. It's closer to a classical role-playing game where you have a DM that has, a module that kind of knows how what the NPC's goals are and what general things that they want to do. In this case, they have a couple of features, or like they need to create the design space for features to be released, but not necessarily know what exact feature will be involved, right? So the storytellers create this design space and use our story. They know generally what direction it needs to go, but depending on who reacts in what way will decide where it goes, right? So had anybody had recovered Jamil Sorum's corpse, that would have changed the story. Had Lucas Rahalan not brought back the brain slice to the Amar, that would have changed the story. You know, we interact with it. We interact with it and with CCP much closer to you would expect, like a DM and players, than a game like a World of Warcraft. You know, now
Yeah,
let's go through this
good luck
chapter's
getting
dungeon.
good luck getting a World of Warcraft GM to roleplay on a tune. Like that is story that is fed to you, not story that you are a part of. The reason why they're only 1 or 2 or 3 steps ahead of us is because they're waiting for our input.
Yeah.
Well,
So
it could benefit from looking at the player base as if they are RPers, even though they're not, right?
Everyone is RP.
I said that exact thing earlier,
exactly.
Ash.
They could adapt the way that they tell stories, and they try to write stories in the lore and in events to actually fit around the fact that, well, we don't care if you're not role playing or don't feel like you're role playing. We're going to treat you as if you are, and we're going to treat you as a character in our story writing, and kind of expect some of these things to be integrated, at least on a group level. So integrate the narratives of the different player groups in Eve, right? Write them indirectly into the events and the lore, and then do these almost trees of decision where, well, if these groups do A, B, or C, this is going to be the consequence for the story and for how we then deal with, say, another group, right? So they could make this weird seesaw effect, or this 3 pendulum interaction effect by stirring the pot, so to speak. So they're pushing on Ash's group, and then that means that they're going to pull on goons, dependent on what the story leads into, right? I would just like to see story writing like that from CCP, because I think we've historically proven that the interesting history and the interesting narrative in EVE Online always includes the players.
I just want to strengthen the point of everything is RP. You will every once in a while pull up a player character info dialog box, and that player's portrait, that character's portrait, will be the blank, the gray background with the black silhouette of the vague shape of a head. And if you then click on the show full body, you get an error message, and the error message says that this capsuleer has not gone through the sculpting such and such process, and Concord has barred them from displaying their appearance until they do so. This is a player who is not playing the game, literally not logging in at all. They may never have logged in. They may have made that tune and not logged in, but there is a story surrounding that character that person made and never played. If you have a character, if there exists a character in this game, it has a roles assigned to it and can be the target of other people's role playing.
The most clever thing that EVE Online has done is the fact that the story itself explains our behavior. It explains immortality. It explains the way that the mechanics of the world works when it comes to our way of experiencing the world versus everybody else. And if you do not care about the lore, if you never worry about it, if you're just doing your ratting or your other stuff and screw what the baseliners think, then all you're doing is playing an aloof capsuleer that is so divorced from reality that he thinks he's basically just treating everything like it's a giant video game, which is very consistent with the lore. We are the monsters, and that is kind of the end state of that monstrosity. And if you read through stuff, you'll see that the player or the characters in the universe, the baseliners, the people that have to deal with us, feel that way about us. They feel that we are dangerous and chaotic, and they speak about our wars and lament the fact that we battle with millions of people in the armies of nations as if they were our playthings, and they're scared of us for it.
And this is also all ties into why I've called EVE Online stagnant over the last 3 to 5 years, because all of these effects, like whether you're talking lore or big battles or all that meta stuff that I call EVE's unique selling point, it needs to be fed. It needs to have these forcing effects where you tap the wheel a little bit all the time. You don't have to sit there and spin it manually. You just need to tap it a little bit with interesting changes, with interesting storyline. Yeah, exactly.
Catalysts.
Those small kinetic agitations is enough. But if it starts slumping, it's really, really hard to get the momentum back. You have this inertia happening, right? And I think that's why we've been in such a bad place. But I'm seeing CCP really stepping up and feeding that mechanism again. And I'm just looking forward to seeing when it's also going to hit the lore aspect. People that know me know that I'm not a big fan of the Triglavian stuff, but I can get shut down by Ash for that. But I would like to see more of the traditional lore being just fed a little bit into the player base in a meaningful way. And I would love to see it on some sort of stream or video content.
Well, the Triglavians of all of the content that we've seen.
I would strongly recommend you look into what's been going on in the Amarr Warzone since the collusion. Because since then, the Amarr faction warfare players have been working in almost lockstep with Sorum and their military, and including Diamond Rats attacking Mimitar faction warfare owned structures. The lore itself calling out exactly where the Amarr faction warfare guys have created their foothold and where they're attacking next. And this is like, I can go there and there are players plexing the gates. We are taking this system, they say. So like right now, there is no division, none, between the Amarr faction warfare players and the Amarr the Amarr NPC entities. They are working is one story at the moment, and have been for the last several months.
Ash, what's your prognosis on the concept we talked about almost a year ago, I think, about NPCs engaging and taking Sov?
I think that Drifters got really shut down. I think that maybe we're a few years out from it yet. But I mean, I think it's a good idea, but clearly both the tech and culturally we're not ready yet. I think maybe more exploration into things like faction warfare. I think that a change like changing all of the new player experience over to Concord or something like that, where basically allegiances with different pirate factions could be looked at. I think that an exploration of the pirate factions would be in order, and you could build out from there. But it does feel a lot further away than it did a year ago.
I feel like there's room in NPC Null for an NPC Sov war that is kind of a null expansion of the faction warfare concept.
I'm not opposed. I'm still not 100% convinced that we won't see some sort of growing conflict in drone regions between Drifters and other forces.
If the Drifters and their allies versus the Triglavians and their allies were fighting over space that players couldn't currently own and will still not be able to own, and players could join sides as if, faction warfare except the null, I think that would be very exciting gameplay.
It's also worth noting that the one thing I have gathered from my detection systems is that there's something that we're missing. There's some sort of big twist. There's some sort of big fact about the nature of things in this conflict that we don't know yet, that CCP is getting increasingly close to revealing. And so I suspect that FanFest was getting close to being when we would see this, perhaps related to the Sancha. Maybe not, but I think that right now is a better time than almost any other to be at least paying attention to the world news channels.
CCP has been coyly telegraphing a major twist in the currently developing precursor crisis for some time now. And it is like they're being coy about it, they're not sharing anything, but we know something is coming.
Hey, Fonsui, did you notice who posted the actual dev forum post for the faction warfare changes?
I literally didn't click it yet. I saw Dokuzen posted the news.
Paradox.
No kidding. For anyone who doesn't know, Paradox is the smuggest CCP employee. He will throw little tidbits at you and then stand a few feet away with his arms crossed, smiling as you rack your brains trying to figure out what he just said. We love you, Paradox.
Embrace the paradox. So yeah, that's my feelings on faction warfare.
Isn't that a little out of his lane?
Isn't faction warfare just like a little bit out of Paradox's lane? Like that's not.
Paradox is part of Team Talos. Faction warfare was Team Talos's project for this chunk.
Do we have anything else we want to cover? Do we want to open this up to everyone? Move over to the voice one.
I think that the most important thing is that well, not the most important thing, but one of the final notes of all of this is that not only does this faction warfare revamp represent the end of this PvP quadrant, it represents the end of my predictions. The fact that faction warfare was going to be part of this quadrant was kind of my furthest reaching telegraphing from their previous clues, leading all the way back to eVegas. And so there's a lot of questions about what the next quadrant is going to bring. The only thing we know is that this quadrant is going to wrap up with the moon rebalance. So we'll have to see what the next quadrant has. Oh, also, if we want to talk about hobo leaks and things, spooky things, you made a reference to it. There are 2 new strings that I wanted to be very dismissive of because they look like they're not something to be paid attention to. But not only have they patched it into Tranquility, but they've made sure to re-bring it into Tranquility twice when it gets patched out because of other things, when they're shifting around with the strings. So there are 2 new factions. One is the United Empire Conglomerate, and the other is Test Faction for Trig Standings. So it looks like it's going to escalate. And there are other rats in the files too that are only Amarian. So it looks like there could be some sort of Amarian sub-event or but they are named after the same type of rats as the ones in the site. So maybe a new site that only appears in Amar space, which would kind of make sense because more invasions occur in Amar space than anywhere else. But this is still very like, we have no idea, but it does look like they are maneuvering for if not a chapter 3, at least a chapter 2, page 3. I don't know, whatever.
I still predict the addition of the other 3 Empires rats before these things are shown to us.
Yeah, but as we pointed out, eventually the United Empire Conglomerate does suggest that it would be the Amar as part of that faction as opposed to United Empire's which would be all
I
four. So we'll have
oh,
to see.
that's your interpretation. Mine is different. I see the three words allied, empire, conglomerate, and to me that reads as a conglomerate of the empires. And like it's singular empire because it is a conglomerate of unit empire.
And it is up to the rest of you guys to decide which way do you want to go. But either way, it's
I'm
interesting
putting
stuff.
I'm putting 50 million ISK on it.
Oh, well, I was bringing up a counter argument. I don't really care. We'll have to see.
No, we have to bet.
Oh, okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah. So
how much do you want to bet that test trig, test standing for trig, will be the final title?
Oh God, that's not happening. That would be a mistake. But yeah. Do we have anything else that we want to cover? Do we want to open this up to everyone? Because I think I'm not sure we can actually hit the stop button on the stream without Matterall, but we can stop
You can
being
do
in
it
the channel that
remotely.
broadcasts. Yeah, if no one has anything else that they want to cover, we should hop up and tell the viewers to hop up with us, and we'll just have some dead air on stream until Matterall shuts it off.
All right, I'm heading back over to Convocation Discord then. Actually.
Yep, I'm gonna go up into public voice.
Okay, 07. I should at some point be going live. We'll see.
Hopefully we can get Matterall back and he can raid everybody over.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see you guys later.